Hello again, Conte. There was an update to Steamworks fairly recently, and I have some ideas on how to use that in a kind of exploity way, but I needed to go over the mechanics themselves first in a video. Now that the updates come over to PC, I think it seemed like a good time to talk about all these new mechanics, how to use them, how they work, what small changes have been made, and also I've seen a lot of people asking whether or not the rarest items like the Celestial Prints can drop under the new 10 times mode, so I'm hopefully going to answer that too. So you can switch between normal output and 10 times output with this new adjust output option at the Steamworks dude. Now if I do change, you'll see, so it does reset the progress. The Steam gauge, by the way, is just your progress towards overdrives, so keep that in mind. The new times 10 mode lets you spend fuel at 10 times the rate. I've kind of exhausted all of my fuel, you'll see why in a second. But so if I do, I don't know, x square triangle, you can see I spent 100 fuel there rather than 10, and I got 10 mega barrel bombs rather than 1. So it doesn't increase the use of, it doesn't like make it 10 times by letting you spend at a faster rate or like going into rapid mode or anything. No, what it does is it consumes 10 times the fuel and it gives you 10 times the rewards. And it gives you them not in the form of 10 separate individually rolled rewards, but 10 times of whichever one reward that you rolled. That was a bit of a tongue twister. Probably the biggest question I got is how the Overdrive bonus works. So for example, if it's a Celestial Rivarian print, do I get 10 of them upon my first overdrive? And unfortunately, as you can see on screen, you do not. You get them as individual rewards. So for example, if your overdrive bonus is a Celestial print, your next overdrive bonus would be a King Armor Sphere. The one after that would be a King Armor Sphere, and so on and so forth. So you get them rolled one at a time. So you get Celestial, then King, then King, then King, then King, up to 10. So yeah, it does roll the overdrive bonuses individually. I understand why it would be a little bit too powerful if you get 10 Celestial tickets for just one overdrive. But yeah, sorry if you're expecting better news than that, but no, the overdrive bonus does not follow the same pattern. And as you can see, all the animations are the same. You'll see it soon, hopefully, but we have bonus modes and they work in exactly the same way. We're in auto mode and that's not going any faster. The gauge fill rate in the back, the yellow, orange, red bar, it doesn't seem to be 10 times faster. It might be slightly increased, but it's definitely not 10 times faster or anything. The only difference is that we are consuming 10 times the fuel per roll, so 100 rather than 10 fuel. And in exchange, we are getting 10 times each item. The other main change was that the auto mode button, so R2 on my PS4 controller for example, it works automatically completely now. It doesn't get stuck after an overdrive. So when you reach overdrive and the animation plays out, the cutscene finishes, the Steamworks will resume. Whereas in the past, you could hold R2 down until the overdrive, at which point you'd have to release and then repress it. So now you can leave on Steamworks overnight completely without any human input. All of this footage you're seeing right now, I'm not using a macro, I'm not holding down the button myself, I've tied it down, I've put my controller down, and even though it's overdrived, you can see it sort of carried on going by itself without any manual intervention. So yeah, you can leave it on overnight now without any weirdness. You don't have to use macros or anything like I used to. With that said, I wouldn't recommend throwing out your macros just yet. If you have a good setup for using macros, I would still recommend sticking with them, because a good macro will skip the overdrive cutscene, and if you haven't got that sorted, you should. Now that might not seem important, however, even though the gauge fill rate for overdrives doesn't seem to be 10 times faster, it does seem to be a fair amount faster than it was in base, and the overdrive cutscene itself is actually remarkably long. It's kind of easy to forget about because we skip it all the time, but it lasts a really long time. And yeah, so the combination of that means that it actually does make a significant difference, at least in my testing. In previous tests, I was using my macro, which skipped overdrive, the cutscene, and I was spending somewhere in the region of 15,000 fuel an hour. However, in this round of testing, I didn't use the macro, I just held down R2 using the new mechanic, and I spent somewhere in the region of 12,000 fuel an hour. Well, technically 120,000 obviously, but I mean 12,000 ticks. And that's like a 20% decrease in fuel expenditure rate, which is kind of significant, and I'm pretty sure the only difference is the increased rate of overdrives and having to sit through all those cutscenes. So yeah, if you have the macro set up, then do keep that in mind. I have taken the time to spend somewhere in the region of 3 million fuel in total. You're hopefully seeing the results of that on screen now. I had to record it in separate chunks because the files were getting too long for my computer, something like 17 gigabytes per recording. But yeah, you can see the results here. I am going to put them in a spreadsheet in a second, but just before we talk about that, what I would like to do is make a couple of points. First things first, if you spend a huge amount of fuel in a row, you aren't going to get complete value out of that. The reason being, you can only carry 9,999 of most items in the game. I'm not sure about the gourmet tickets. However, you can see like with my mega potions, with my ancient potions, and with the large barrel bombs, for example, from just now, you saw it pop up that I couldn't take them, and that's because I'm at max, and there's nowhere to get more than that. So, for example, with the steel melding tickets, you got to be careful. You should like spend them before you build up too much of a backlog, otherwise they'll go to waste. The other thing I wanted to mention is that this isn't specifically for this new Steamworks update. However, it's just sort of following the standard update chain. Here we go. Zionium crystals. The Safi-Jiva mantle can now be melded. Now, I'm sure you know exactly what implications that has. However, I'm not going to talk about them here just yet because I'm going to do a separate video on that. That's one of the exploit things I wanted to talk about. But yeah, so this is a really important thing to note. You can now make the Safi-Jiva mantles. So we are in Spreadsheet Town, where I have added my results into the spreadsheet. You don't need to worry about these numbers on the right and these numbers on the left, really. We'll talk about them in a second. But yeah, these are the number of each drop I got by spending somewhere in the region of 3 million fuel. It was actually this is the number. This is the amount of fuel I spent. 3.2108 million, and this was the time it took. About 1602 minutes. Sorry that these numbers are a bit disorganized. I should own up to something. I tried to record them both in full. The first batch, these ones over here, I recorded in full, and it took 11 hours and 30 seconds. The second batch, I was actually unable to record it. Well, I tried recording it, and unfortunately, it kind of broke halfway because my hard disk was full. Yeah, these files were quite large, as you can imagine, for 11 hours of recording footage. So yeah, I don't actually know exactly how long it took me to spend this other fuel. So I just extrapolated the time it took here and the fuel I spent here, and sort of proportionally scaled it up to try and estimate how much time it took. It's probably a reasonable estimate, but it is subject to sort of being slightly incorrect. So take these drop rates per minute with maybe a slight grain of salt. So yeah, pretty standard stuff. I just want to mention one thing. Just because these are both in the region of like 25,000, that doesn't mean that every 25,000 you would get either one gold ticket or one celestial print. No, it'd mean you'd get one of each. The way these numbers work is it's not one or the other. It's every 30,000 fuel you expect to get one celestial print, one and a bit gold print, 100 silver tickets, so on and so forth. Now we can compare the drop rates from sort of previous tests to the new tests, and you can see the numbers are fairly similar. So mega potions, for example, on average 26.2 fuel, on average 26.2 fuel. You'd expect that to be the most accurate because you get so many of them. And even things like the steel and silver, 104, 306. We got 100, 308, so it's roughly the same. There is a bit of a discrepancy between the gold and celestial prints here and the gold and celestial prints here. On average here, it was somewhere between 30,000, and I think we concluded it was sort of the same drop rate, so 30,000 each. Whereas if we make that same assumption here, it's more in the region of like 26,000 each. So there's definitely a difference there. I'm not 100% sure why it's so different, or if these numbers are better. It's really hard to say. The fact is, when you're dealing with sample sizes like this, 11 results with a probability of 0.000 whatever, there is obviously the likelihood that you get a couple of lucky results, and that skews your numbers. And so it's hard to say what exactly the values are. The other discrepancy I wanted to draw attention to is the time per drop. Even though we're getting the same results, and even though we're getting the same results, and I've scaled it by 10 here just to keep the numbers the same, you can see it takes us a lot longer. So for example, per gold egg, we're getting 2 minutes, whereas here it was 1.5. Even per mega potion, it's 0.13 minutes, whereas here it was 0.11. And you can see they've all gone up slightly, even for things that cost the same amount. So for example, the gold tickets here, 22,000 fuel, here 27,000 fuel. But this time, 114 minutes is larger than this time, 110 minutes. And that is, again, because of the discrepancy caused by the overdrive cutscenes, I believe. That is the only difference I've been able to account for. Maybe my scaling of the times has caused this issue, for God's sake. Maybe the scaling of times has caused this issue. However, again, I said I spent 12,000 fuel per hour here, or 120,000. And here I spent around 15,000. So we're definitely being able to spend more fuel when we're skipping the overdrive cutscenes, and it does seem to make a pretty significant difference.